Welcome to North America's webinar, 7 Key Tools for Resilience in Times of Stress. I'm Sally Benner, Associate Vice President of Development for Medical Sciences based in New York City. The speaker today, Dr. Jennifer Wild, will present for about 40 minutes. After that, I'll join to moderate a discussion based on questions you submitted before the session and today in the Q&A tab on your screen. We'll get to as many questions as time will allow. Caring for our mental health isn't a trend, but a commitment that the University of Oxford made to develop gold standard research and clinical therapies. Many alumni say they never visited the Old Road Medical Campus when they were studying at Oxford. Here is what it was recently the NHS's Warneford Hospital, now decommissioned, and the site for Oxford's planned Mental Health and Wellness Campus in Headington. Concentrating child, adolescent, and adult mental health, having labs dedicated to studying the aging brain, suicide prevention, and indeed COVID's effect on mental health on one campus will expedite medical research and therapies. In the second image, this is the Life and Mind building under construction now. This is on the site of the former Tinbergen building in central Oxford. It will be the location for the new Department of Biology and Professor Jennifer Wild's academic home, the Department of Experimental Psychology. This novel combination of people and planet will create a common space for biologists to celebrate with behavioral scientists on urgent issues that we're facing today. As societies around the world emerge from the pandemic, we find that we take our first steps with a degree of anxiety. The idea of returning to our workplaces and schools may cause some of us to feel dread or fear because what we knew and what was so familiar before COVID is no more. For that reason, we thought we could learn from an Oxford researcher about how to approach this new era, about how to not let our fears get the best of us. Basically, to teach us behavioral skills to prevent anxiety and to build our reservoirs of resilience. Professor Jennifer Wild is a consulting clinical psychologist and researcher. She's an international expert on how to build resilience to stress and trauma and how to overcome PTSD. The basis of Dr. Wild's presentation is her new book, Be Extraordinary: 7 Key Skills to Transform Your Life from Ordinary to Extraordinary. You can purchase this ebook on several digital platforms. I'll see you on the other side to present your questions. Professor Jennifer Wild, we're grateful to host you today, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Sally, for inviting me. I'm just going to share my slides before we get started. So, Sally, can we see these?
All is well, full screen.
Lovely, thank you. So it's true, I'm a trauma expert, but what can trauma and stress teach us about resilience? As a psychologist, I specialize in helping people to overcome post-traumatic stress disorder. This is the PTSD, the crippling stress reaction that afflicts soldiers and other survivors of terrible events. As a scientist, I develop and test strategies to prevent PTSD. So I've built programs based on the latest science to improve resilience for people in the most stressful and dangerous jobs as police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and now ICU workers. In my 20 years of practice, I have noticed something remarkable. The tools that transform trauma and extreme stress are the same tools that lead people to achieve extraordinary success, that lead people to supercharge their resilience. There are 7 key tools we've researched in my lab, and in this talk, I'll give you a snapshot of them so you can better manage the anxiety and stress in your lives and progress your path to supercharging resilience. So first, Focus on facts, not feelings, to deal with worry. Science shows that 88% of our worries never come true. And one of the best ways to discover this is to keep a worry diary for a week, note your worry and then the outcome, and tally it. How many worries did you have? How many came true? You'll likely discover that your worries come true much less often than you feel they will, which is good news. It means when you spot your worrying, you can remind yourself of a reassuring fact. Most of your worries don't come true. Research shows that the best thing to do when you spot that you are worrying is to disengage from it. And how do you disengage from worry? It can be all-consuming. A study carried out at King's in London found that picturing the likely outcome to your worry, so that's an outcome based on facts, not feelings, and of you coping no matter what comes your way, or picturing any positive image, such as sunshine, led to dramatic decreases in anxiety and worry. The team at King's trained people who had uncontrollable worry to practice replacing their worry with images of possible positive outcomes in their mind's eye, or they trained them to talk through possible positive outcomes using words, not pictures, or to picture positive images completely unrelated to their worries, such as sunshine or a meadow. Everyone in the study benefited from reductions in anxiety and distress, and they sustained these improvements 1 month later. So you'll see on this slide, the blue line represents people with uncontrollable worry who were trained to replace a worry thought with a positive image of a realistic outcome to their worry. The yellow line were people with uncontrollable worry who were trained to replace their worry with a positive image that was completely unrelated to the worry. So it could be sunshine, a flower, a meadow, or something like that. And then the red line were the people who were told to replace their worry with a realistic outcome in words rather than in pictures. And you can see that all those forms of interventions helped people to dramatically decrease worry, and they sustained those benefits at 5 weeks. So I think that's really exciting. And what it means is that when you do spot your worrying, use this as a cue to picture possible positive outcomes to your worry, or even a positive image like sunshine. You'll feel less anxious as a result. So I invite you to call to mind an image, a positive image you can use in the future to interrupt your worry, such as an image of sunshine, a beach, a meadow, you winning a running race, lifting weights, relaxing, going for a stroll. And then when you are worrying in the future and get caught up in overthinking, call the image to mind to interrupt the cycle and get out of your head. Worrying doesn't solve problems. We need practical thinking for this, which is the next tool on this slide. So extraordinary resilient thinking is not overthinking. Resilient thinking is about how to move forward, not why the past happened in the way we feel it did. Resilient thinking nips dwelling in the bud, because dwelling takes us round and round in circles, it makes us feel rubbish, and it leads to no plan or action. So imagine this, you wake up early on Friday morning, that's tomorrow morning, and you get ready for a really important meeting you're chairing on Zoom at 9 a.m. You switch on your laptop and the screen is black. It doesn't start. You press the on and off button a bit frantically again and again, and it doesn't start. Uh-oh, what's going on? Thoughts start to race through your mind. Why won't my laptop start? Why is this happening today of all days? Why didn't I spot any problems with it last night? Why do problems like this always happen to me? Imagine this is happening to you. How might you be feeling? Now, I'd like you to imagine the same scenario again. And this time, when your laptop doesn't start, you think, how can I best deal with this? How can I chair the meeting at 9 a.m.? So in the first scenario, with why thoughts swelling your mind, you'll be more inclined to run back to bed and pull the duvet over your head. In the second scenario, how thoughts guide problem solving and decision making. You'll be able to find a solution, such as suggesting to chair the meeting over your mobile, or even calling in on your landline. Dwelling is an unproductive pattern of thinking. The more you do it, the more you strengthen the neural pathways in your brain, making it the default mode of thinking when you encounter disappointment or stress. What happens when health professionals dwell? Well, we looked at 500 ambulance workers at the start of their career, and we measured lots of psychological variables, lots of personality and psychological variables, lots of cognitive and behavioral processes related to potential stress. And we then followed these paramedics for 2 years to see if we could predict who became unwell over that period of time. On this slide, you'll see that the average age was 30. The majority of the sample, it was slightly more biased to men to women, so it was a 60-40 split. And it was a relatively well-educated sample, so most people had a degree or they had A levels. And what you'll see on this slide are the results. And paramedics, there were only 2 factors. Out of everything we measured, there were only 2 factors that predicted poor health over a 2-year period. So paramedics who identified as dwelling about past events when they joined the service were on track to develop an episode of PTSD. And so an example of dwelling would be, when past events come to mind, I dwell on what I could have done differently. And paramedics who identified what we would call unhelpful thoughts about resilience, such as, I'm not able to adapt to change, I can't really deal with whatever comes my way, they were on track to develop depression. So this leads to the question, can we train people to think practically, and does it help? So in this study, we traumatized a large sample of people. And before we did that, we trained them to think, we traumatized them by showing them real life footage of traumatic car crashes in films, real ones. And we trained one group to, while they were watching the films, to think about why these sorts of unpleasant events happen, why bad things happen in the world. And we trained another group to think about, how is this situation going to be resolved? What is the next step? So it was what we call abstract thinking compared to more practical thinking. And what you'll see on this slide are the results. So the blue bars represent the group that we trained to think in a dwelling way. So they were trained to think more in kind of abstract thoughts when they were watching the trauma films. And you can see they had significantly more unwanted memories and significantly higher PTSD symptoms 1 week later, compared to the group who saw the same films and were trained to think about, how is the situation going to be resolved? What's the next best step? So they had much fewer unwanted memories, much lower PTSD scores. So turn your whys to how. Why becomes your cue to think how. How can I move forwards? And use then versus now to break the link with past unpleasant memories. So that's the next tool on this slide. So then versus now is a trauma treatment tool. It helps to unhook the present from the past by helping you to focus on how now is different to then, rather than focusing on how the situations may be similar. Our brains are tuned to look for patterns, look for similarities. But in actual fact, in order to unhook the present from the past, we need to be thinking about how the situation I'm in now is actually different to that past unpleasant event. For example, if you've spoken up in a meeting and you've had a flat response, next time focus on how different the new environment is to the past, not how similar it is. So perhaps there are different team members in the meeting, your slides are different. Notice how keen people look to hear what you have to say. Focus on the many ways now is different to then. Focusing on what you can see and hear in the here and now keeps you rooted in the present, and it gets your attention out of your head and away from feelings and past painful memories. It keeps you absorbed in the task at hand, which is where you need to be resilient. And how do we know this? We trained people to distinguish between then and now before traumatizing them by having them watch real life footage of unpleasant car crashes. They were taught to focus on the differences between the trauma and what was going on in their life now and practice this technique. Another group was told to push memories of the trauma films out of their mind whenever they came to mind. And a third group was told to do whatever they wanted. And what you'll see on this slide is that the most effective strategy was to focus on how life is different now compared to the past. And you'll see here the blue bar represents the number of unwanted memories related to the trauma films, which are significantly fewer than when people push them out of their minds, which is the red bar, or when they did whatever they wanted when the memories come to mind, which is the yellow bar. And the next tool is plan ahead. This is a really simple tool, but there is a lot of science to planning ahead. So several studies that have come out of our lab show that making a plan in the evening for the next day and including one enjoyable activity in the plan dramatically improves mood, well-being, and productivity. So plan your workday in half-hour chunks and use the plan as a schedule to guide you, revamping and recreating it through the day, especially when you discover that you've wildly underestimated how long it takes to reply to emails, wrap up a Zoom meeting, or a patient consultation, for example. Planning ahead works because it moves routine decision-making to the night before, which frees up mental energy to tackle challenging tasks the following day. So having a detailed plan makes you more productive, meaning you'll be more likely to reach your goals. And of course, including a fun activity, even for a few minutes in your plan, makes it more likely that you'll do something fun, which increases well-being, improves well-being. In a study of 100 frontline paramedics, we found that planning ahead led to significant reductions in psychological distress and significant improvements in well-being. So what you'll see on this slide is the paramedics who were taught to plan ahead, and they carried this out for a period of 2 weeks. And this was compared to another group of paramedics who were given information about mental health and told to read it every night for 2 weeks. And then the third group, the yellow bar, represents the paramedics who were given no task over 2 weeks. And the blue bar you see shows significant reductions in psychological distress. So it's a really simple tool. It's highly, highly effective. It's not a mental exercise. It actually does involve planning your next day in half-hour chunks and being sure to include an enjoyable activity, however brief, in your plan. The next tool I call the 3-minute carrot. And we want to use the 3-minute carrot to kick avoidance. Avoidance keeps anxiety going. There's no other outcome with avoidance. Achieving a more centered life means kicking avoidance. It means choosing what is best for you rather than what is easiest. One common problem or behavior, actually, it's also a problem, but one behavior we all face is procrastination, especially when the weather's nice, which we currently have in the UK. It's easy to put off for tomorrow what would be best done today. So if you're struggling to get started with something you're avoiding, use the 3-minute carrot. Give yourself permission to try the new behavior for just 3 minutes, then reassess how you're feeling, giving yourself permission to carry on for another 3 minutes if you choose, or to stop. So you can also break the first step into tiny steps and take the first tiny step to start. So it's manageable, for example, to complete a small step like write the outline for my business plan before the bigger step, write the background section. Completing the small step gives a sense of achievement and a breath of success to motivate next steps. And after the first step, get cozy with smart language to resist temptations to give in to avoidance. So use the words I don't rather than I can't when you're tempted away from your goals. Studies suggest that if you say I can't, you'll be more likely to give in to temptation and give up the goal you'd planned to work towards. But if when you're faced with temptation, you use the words I don't, you'll be much more inclined to follow through with the goals. So if when your friend asks you out for a drink, you respond with, I don't drink on Tuesdays, you'll be much more likely to follow through with the original goal you had planned for the evening, which could have been writing that business plan. So why is that? Well, using the words I don't in response to temptations increases your sense of empowerment with goals. It makes you more likely to work towards them rather than less likely. And another really key tool to help you over that start line is to make decisions based on how you want to feel in the future, not how you're actually feeling. So most of us make decisions based on how we're feeling in the moment rather than on how we want to be feeling in the future. So one of the ways to kick avoidance is to consider how you want to feel in the future and to be guided by this today. So if exercising is going to make you feel energized and happy, or finishing up an admin task is going to make you feel relieved and rewarded, make your decision to get started based on how you know it will make you feel. rather than on how you're already feeling. The next skill is focus. It absolutely matters what you focus on and how you focus. People who manage stress well choose to focus on what they can do rather than on what they can't. They realize they don't have endless years to will their goals into reality. They optimize their time. And one of the ways they do this is learning to focus efficiently without distraction. So there are two types of focus I'd like to talk to you about. There's helpful focus and unhelpful focus. Unhelpful attention is focus that's gone inside ourselves to our thoughts, our feelings, our fears, our sensations, like our heart rate. For example, if I was worried about sweating, just say I was worried about sweating on my forehead and it dripping down onto my top like this. And I focused all of my attention on this uncomfortable wet patch I now have on my face. I'd soon lose my train of thought and would be working hard to cover up my sweat patches. Maybe I put my hand over my forehead or not really make great eye contact into the camera, which actually would draw far more attention to the part of my body I'm trying to cover up. And actually it would make me distracted. So that's unhelpful attention. It's unhelpful focus. It's also called self-focus. Helpful attention, on the other hand, is the kind of attention that's out of your head and in the world. So by getting lost in my talk with you and ignoring these fake sweat patches and focusing on this talk will make me feel much more at ease, even though you can see what I've done to my face. So people are most satisfied when they're absorbed in the task at hand, and particularly when they're absorbed in something that is challenging enough to be stimulating, but not so challenging that it's frustrating. And finally, extend the compassion you extend to others to yourself. Speaking to yourself with kindness lowers stress hormones and makes you more optimistic, as well as a better problem solver. Whereas self-critical self-talk zaps motivation. So in a study of almost 200 students, Kristen Neff and her team looked at different aspects of being compassionate for oneself, so self-compassion, and its links with positive emotions and qualities. So self-compassion is that capacity to extend kindness to ourselves in instances of pain or failure, that capacity to normalize our difficult experiences by recognizing that people around the world have similar struggles and that our struggles are part of a larger human experience. It's also the capacity to see painful thoughts and feelings as passing rather than identifying with them. Neff and her team discovered that self-compassion was linked to happiness, optimism, positive emotions, qualities such as wisdom, personal initiative, curiosity, agreeableness, extroversion, and conscientiousness. Loads of really positive emotions. Her team concluded that self-compassion may give rise to happiness and calm because it creates feelings of warmth, connection with others, and a sense of balance or equilibrium. When we're happy, we're less likely to ruminate or dwell about the past, which is linked to anxiety and depression. A self-compassionate mindset is linked to adaptive coping skills and could keep people feeling optimistic about the future. Feelings of compassion for oneself and others is linked to greater activation of the left prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain linked to joy and optimism. It can be tough to speak to yourself with kindness. So if you're struggling with this, you could first try to think kind thoughts or carry out kind gestures for other people. The act of being kind will boost your mood and put you in a frame of mind where it's easier for you to be kind to yourself. So just to wrap up, everyone feels anxious and stressed from time to time. There are tools to help these times become less frequent so you can progress your path to resilience without feeling so overwhelmed. So remember, the first tool, facts, not feelings, to overcome worry. Use a worry diary, and in the midst of worry, picture a possible positive outcome to the worry or any positive uplifting image. Tap practical thinking. It's not overthinking. Dwelling is your cue to get out of your head and spot how to move forwards. Use then versus now to break the link to the past, unhooking the present from past events that fueled self-doubt or anxiety. And plan ahead. Break your days into half-hour chunks and assign your tasks. Include a fun activity, even if brief, in your plan. Kick avoidance. Start a new behavior with a tiny step. This gets dopamine flowing. Make decisions based on how you want to feel, not how you are feeling. And use the 3-minute carrot to get started. Remember, I don't versus I can't to resist temptations. And focus. Use self-focused attention as a cue to get out of your head. And finally, compassion. Be kind to your mind. Extend the kindness you offer others to yourself. The world benefits from extraordinarily resilient people. Supercharge your resilience. You can read much more about these tools in the book, Be Extraordinary, 7 Key Tools to Transform Your Life from Ordinary to Extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wild. That was wonderful. I don't have the power over here, but if you stop sharing your screen,
Yeah.
although this might be a great reference, I leave it to you. But I was jotting down notes while I was listening to you. So we had a lot of questions that came in during registration period. And one of them, I think the most obvious one is we're talking about this post-COVID era that we're in. And in my opening remarks, I said we needed to prepare ourselves, with a bit of anxiety for, let's say, September, when we return to work, we return to school, we return to what were once our routines, but they're not the same. It's different now. But at the same, so there's the then now, but also there's the then now in that in September, it won't be then. It won't be March of 2020. It won't be the year of 2020. Can you apply the then versus now thinking with some how-tos so we can prepare for this in this post-COVID era?
Yeah, thanks, Sally. I think that's a really good question. I'm just gonna change it to gallery. Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are a few tools that are going to help in September. So I think when people have anxiety and worry, it usually relates to specific thoughts that they may have. And I think getting really clear about, if I am going back to work in September, what am I worried about? Like what is going through my mind? And I think being really clear and possibly even writing it down and then testing it out, which means going back to work and seeing how you get on with that. Maybe there's a specific event that worries you at work. I've heard a lot of reports of people feeling quite worried about socializing again and having chit chat in the office. And so I think there are a number of tools from this talk that are going to help with that, but I would set it up to test it out. So I'm worried that I've lost social skills. So if I engage in chit chat in the office, I'll come across badly and people will frown at me. So you want to be really, really specific, whatever the fear is. And then I would encourage you to drop the avoidance. Definitely don't avoid the chit chat in the office, but actually engage with people. And what will make it easier will be to switch your focus of attention. So we talked about helpful and unhelpful attention, so self-focused versus externally focused. So when I had the water on my forehead, I was self-focused and it was uncomfortable, but just carrying on with the talk and really focusing and getting lost in the talk just keeps my attention out of my head. And it's the same thing in social, with anxiety in social situations. We really need to get out of our heads and get lost in the conversation. And I think also compassion is going to be helpful too, because I think everybody feels like that. I mean, we've all been communicating on Zoom for ages, well over a year. And so we're all at that level and just recognizing, well, everybody's in the same boat. And, just recognize I'm not the only one who feels uncomfortable. It is actually everybody here. There will be varying degrees of discomfort. Switching your attention from yourself, getting lost in the conversation. And then really importantly, after you have had chit chat in the office, if that was the example worry, noting how it went. How did people respond to you? Was it as bad as you predicted? Did the worry come true? How well did you cope? So I think I would probably go with those tools for September. And then I think, there's another group of people who have anxiety around September because they've actually, they've lost family or friends through COVID. And I think, that is extremely challenging and very tragic. And I think, one of the things that I say to the clients that I work with is to, at some point when we're working with grief, is to be able to look at everything that I did that was helpful for the person, everything that I did that was so, and it was tricky in COVID, wasn't it? Because we weren't able to go to hospitals and everything was on the telephone, and but there are still ways that you may have been there for the person who passed away. And so recognizing that, and also at some point being able to say to yourself, they're no longer suffering. It's a horrendous illness, COVID. It's not a pleasant way to pass away, and being able to say they're no longer suffering can sometimes reduce the kind of concerns we have about that. And then focusing on then versus now. So now it's September. I'm not talking to my relative over the phone in hospital. That was then, they're no longer suffering. Now I have other family members to support me, and I'm going back to work. So I would probably use them versus now in that kind of situation.
Okay. It does sound like you're talking about we have to, and this does come up in some of the questions about facing a trauma. It's not something you should subsume. It's not something you should avoid. You need to face it. There was a loss. And I am picking up in some of the questions that there's a need for resolution or a finality or a conclusion before they can move forward, because there's a foot in each world.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, I think yes, there is, and grief is quite tricky, and I think we never want to say to somebody, get over your loss. You need to say goodbye and get over your loss. We tend to talk about moving forward with the loss, moving forward with your grief. How are you going to take this person with you? Obviously, it's going to be very different to the kind of relationship that you had before. But what I like to do with clients is a kind of continuity. Sorry, I can't say it. Continuity. Continuity.
We got it.
Exercise where we think about, what did this person mean to me? What did they bring out in me? And how can I take that forward? And so a lot of, when I'm working with people who've lost loved ones, often they may come up with, my sister was just the most positive woman, and she just brought out a lot of laughter and a lot of kindness. And then I might ask, and what represents positivity and kindness and laughter today? And then they might say, well, it's it's a picture of sunflowers in a meadow, and that just really represents sunshine, kind of like kindness and beauty. And then what I might suggest is going for a walk in a meadow if that's possible, but also calling to mind that image. So when I'm really struck with the grief that my sister's no longer here, how can I take her with me? Well, I know that what she brought out in me is kindness and laughter, positivity, and I'm going to picture these sunflowers, which represent kindness and positivity to me. And that's just a way of running creating that continuity and running the image on, so you're not stuck at the worst point. And also very helpful to look at, what you did that was helpful to support that person, because often when we lose loved ones, we dwell about things we could have done to prevent the death, what we feel we should have done more, and that just makes us feel worse. So it's helpful to shift the focus to the things that we did do throughout the entire life of that person. That can help to reduce distress. But yeah, that's a really difficult one, and then versus now can help in that, now it is a different time and they're no longer suffering, and this is how I'm taking them forward.
The other, so in some ways I'm hearing that there's something like a reboot of our hard drive. We just have to reboot and clear the memory, and not to say it didn't happen, but we're here today. There was a question that was submitted ahead that I'm just going to summarize and say was the grief of lost rituals in our lives and society. Someone wrote, reaching retirement in a time of pandemic isolation seems to carry its own challenges. For example, did anyone see me leave the room? Are there particular things to watch out for and address in this circumstance? And I think it's this questioner is, they lost the ceremony of entering retirement and leaving their place of employment. Students have lost their moment of commencement or elevating to another grade, going from grade school to high school, not being able to attend a wedding. So it's not the morbidity of COVID, but it's also this other things that we carry in our hearts that we've lost something. There's a grief for that moment. I'm not going to go back and regraduate from my undergrad again. What tool would you apply to, as you say, not saying getting over it or graduating beyond the moment, but acknowledge the loss. There's a grief to that loss. I guess it's looking forward to the future.
Yeah, I guess, yes, I also think it's really important to look at the meaning. So what does it mean that to the individual that they didn't have the commencement, or that there wasn't a ceremony upon retirement? And what we want to get to is the meaning of that, and then slightly update that meaning and take that forward. And this is all very abstract, so I'm just going to have to guess here. But if on retirement, you're not with peers and there's no kind of celebration, or maybe there's an acknowledgement online, maybe there's not. So what would that mean? It might mean, someone might feel not valued. For example, I'm not valued. My work hasn't been valued. My entire career that I've poured into this institution isn't acknowledged. That makes me feel like I'm unvalued. And then what we want to do is think about, well, how accurate is this meaning? And then we might want to try to update it. Well, in what ways am I valued? Looking at my career, in what ways have I been valued? And I think also, what is important? How can I celebrate this? This is a difficult, transition. How can I celebrate? How would I like it to be marked, even though, everything has to be online? Is there something I could suggest? And it may be many months post-retirement now, but can I still suggest a get together on Zoom or some sort of celebration or acknowledgement? Might be another way around it as well. It's going to have to be a transformed celebration, but I don't think it should be avoided altogether. And there will have been various different ways of commencing for students that may have been available, but I really do think looking at the meaning and then just trying to update that meaning can help to soften it, and help people feel potentially a little bit less disappointed with what's happened.
Yes, and this one thing I picked up in your book, The Extraordinary, is the self-powering, empowering part of it. These are tools within ourselves. So whether I'm sitting on a subway, in a subway car in Manhattan, I can think of, what am I ruminating over? What's bothering me? And I can recall one of your tools and say, do I need to apply this? What's in my toolbox today here on the subway? There were questions that came up around caring for others. So people are taking care of themselves, but they're carrying heavy loads for caring for others. And I'll put a couple of these together. A few of them are teachers, and they could be teachers and professors, but they're in the teaching professions. One says, I work with university-age students who seem to feel more anxiety and depression. Please share tips to help these students. And another one is, what is the best way to support my 10-year-old daughter in developing tools? So focusing on students, whatever ages, these are people in the caring professions who are extending their care in ways where students look to the instructors for instruction.
Yeah. So the first question is about sort of like high rates of anxiety and depression among students and what teachers can do to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. So I tend to categorize mild, moderate, and severe. So if we're looking at for anxiety, I think one of the best tools really is anxiety perpetuates when we're focused on ourselves, like our thoughts or fears or body sensations. One of the best ways to interrupt an anxiety cycle is to really help the student to focus outside their heads, like even if it's just doing jumping jacks, just breaking that anxious cycle and then testing the anxious thoughts. So helping your student to identify, what is it that they're worried about? What is it that they really think is going to happen? And then is there a way we can test that and then record the outcome and help this person discover that the majority of their anxious thoughts don't come true? And because they don't come true, that's actually really reassuring, because there's a discrepancy between how we feel when we're anxious, and we tend to use emotional reasoning. So I feel so distressed, it means that this anxious thought is going to come true, versus reality, which in reality, 88% of our worries don't come true. And it's higher for some people. If we keep a worry diary, you get to work out the actual percentage of worries that come true for you. So I would probably encourage you to help your student with that. And I would encourage, in relation to anxiety, I would also encourage really to use the focus of attention. And a really good exercise to do with students, which is very eye-opening, is to get them to walk somewhere busy and drop a bottle of water. I know this sounds crazy, but it's very effective. Drop a bottle of water, and whilst looking down, estimate how many people are looking at them. And then look up and around and see how many people actually look at them. And actually, they discover that actually nobody's really interested. Everybody's absorbed in their own lives and what's going on in their own lives. They really don't mind that somebody's dropped a bottle of water, and they're not going to give it a lot of attention. And it really helps people and students to discover that they're making themselves the center of their own attention. And if they can shift their attention out of their head to use that feeling of feeling self-conscious or anxious as a cue, okay, I'm wrapped up in my thinking. This doesn't solve my problems. I need to disengage from this, just shift my attention out of my head. Sometimes that's hard. So I'm just going to break the cycle and do some jumping jacks. And then I might sit down and write out what I'm worried about, and then test it and record the outcome. So that's how I would approach anxiety in a nutshell. With depression, there's mild, moderate, and severe. So with mild depression, we really want to get people active, and we really want to make sure that they're not withdrawing, because that's going to perpetuate a depressive cycle and move them into the moderate category. So mild depression, it's always about exercising and socializing, even though they don't feel like it. It really comes down to that tool. I'm going to make decisions based on how I want to feel, not how I'm actually feeling. And I use the metaphor with people. Have you ever had the experience of not wanting to go to the gym, and then you go to the gym and you feel fantastic? But if you'd made the decision to avoid the gym based on how you were feeling, you wouldn't have had that experience of feeling fantastic. So you have to think about how I want to feel in the future and make a decision to get active today. So that can be helpful for mild depression. Moderate depression, similar. You want people to get active, and you really want to get them planning ahead, planning their days, and be sure to plan an enjoyable activity in their day, which could include exercise and a social activity, something where they're, talking to other people, because this also gets us out of our heads. When we're conversing with other people and we're curious about what's going on with them, it's harder for us to overthink our problems. So that can be really helpful. Overthinking keeps depression going. So really helping students to spot when they're overthinking. And you could take them through the metaphor of the laptop starting, in relation to a meeting, and they put their laptop on, it doesn't start, they can't get onto Facebook. They probably don't use Facebook anymore. It's probably Instagram, Snapchat. I'm really not up on it, but they can't use it. And so then they start to think, why can't I get on the app or whatever? And how does that make them feel? It makes them feel quite deflated and depressed. But if they were to think, okay, so my phone's not working, my laptop's not working, how can I get onto Snapchat? And they're moving into a more solution focused, more practical way of thinking. They're going to solve that problem, and they're actually going to have a boost in their mood. So recognizing how unhelpful dwelling is, and helping them to disengage from it, getting active, and reaching out to friends, something really helpful for moderate depression. And it's obviously helpful for severe depression as well. But with severely depressed people, often the best treatment, research shows, is a bit of medication. And so that can be helpful for really depressed people. It's not to say that they shouldn't do any of the other things that we've talked about. They absolutely will benefit from exercise and socializing and planning ahead, but they may be able to engage in those tools with a little bit of medication. I would say that severe depression is pretty rare, and that the majority of students that you'll come across are going to be mild or moderately depressed, in which case you can help them pretty easily with these tools.
Very good. There is, speaking about, I think it's time for a 3-minute carrot. There is a question here about, why is a 3-minute carrot 3 minutes?
Good question, because 3 minutes is achievable for everybody. Everybody can do something for 3 minutes. You can wash the dishes for 3 minutes. You can run for 3 minutes. And it just makes it so manageable. If you think, oh, I just don't want to exercise, I'm tired, I just don't want to get out of the house. And you think, wait a second, I'm just going to do it for 3 minutes. I can do that. And what we find is that people, they do go for a walk or a run for 3 minutes. And then at the 3 minute point, they think, you know what, this is actually kind of nice. And they continue for another 3 minutes. And then actually they end up doing maybe a 10-minute or a 12-minute run, which is more than they had planned. And they just feel a sense of accomplishment and achievement. So 3 minutes is a doable amount of time. It's that amount of time that actually you can get off the couch and you can do it, because you can think, I can always come back to Netflix or whatever it is later. But this is actually quite manageable. But everybody goes for much longer than 3 minutes, but it's just enough to get you started.
I can do that. All right. A question, how is, and this is, you were speaking about semantics before, how is redirecting thoughts different from thought suppression? What are the best strategies to use to move on when a worry does come true? When it comes true.
Okay, yeah. When a worry comes true, then I would invite you to look at how well you coped with that worry. Because often when we're anxious about our worrisome thoughts, we often feel like we wouldn't be able to cope. So I won't be able to cope if so-and-so becomes unwell. I'm very worried they'll become unwell and I won't be able to cope. And so maybe they get a diagnosis, and how well do we cope in that situation? And I think that is really key, because we tend to cope much better than we think we will. And that can help to reduce the worry. Yeah, so I think that's important. And also making sure that you have support around, if a worry comes true, that you have support. It's difficult to know specifically what the worry is, but if it is about illness in somebody else, that you do have support to help you with that if you're caring for somebody, for example. And taking breaks, but recognizing that you cope much better than you've thought you would beforehand is really, really important when a worry comes true.
Sounds like there's a balance in self-awareness, is don't get all caught up in yourself. If you drop a bottle of water in public, no one's really looking. But at the same time, if you survived a moment of worry or survived a worry coming true or a terrible episode, you're on the other side of it, even if it's just 1 minute later. Recognize yourself for that.
Yeah, absolutely. You are on the other side of it, and it may feel devastating and horrendous. And, every day you're on the other side of it. And it's very difficult to speak about without, concrete examples, but I'm thinking of loss in my head, and that's probably like everyone's worst fears, really. And it is devastating in the immediate aftermath of loss. But and it's devastating too when we don't have rituals such as funerals and things like that in the way that we had them before. But just doing what you can to pull support around you so that you can boost your coping, including a bit of a break for yourself every day, even if it's 5-7 minutes. Recognizing what you did was helpful for the other person, and that lots of people are going through this. I think that helps to break down the isolation, just recognizing whatever it is that you're worried about, somebody else is also worried about that too.
You're an expert in PTSD and recovering from PTSD. There are a couple of questions here. One says, I have PTSD and have been feeling triggered during the pandemic homeschooling by my 2 young boys with ASD as well as other social issues. So it's people who have not recovered from it or are living with it, who are trying to function in this very irregular time. Another one says, how does being in denial about past trauma manifest, and how to get rid of shame at not having coped better at the time? So that's talking about in the past.
So if we look at having PTSD today, there are really effective treatments available for PTSD, which are very short and they're offered remotely. So in the States, I think cognitive processing therapy, there's lots of recommended treatments, but cognitive processing therapy is a really good one for PTSD. I think there's one core chapter in my book on dealing with unpleasant memories, and that gives a few trauma treatment tools which can be helpful. And I think, you know, with trauma that leads to PTSD, we often work out the worst moments of the trauma, and then we try to work out the worst meaning, and then we try to update that meaning. And then the updated meaning becomes part of the trauma story, if that makes sense. So if I had a car accident and I thought I was going to die, and the worst thing about dying for me is not seeing my family again, then updating that trauma would be, I survived the car accident, I didn't die, and I see my family again. And it's really key to put in those extra kind of updated meanings. That really helps, and it starts to change it kind of softens the trauma memory so that it's not always stopping at the worst moment and the worst meaning, but it's become a bit updated. And then I think that can be quite hard to do on yourself, by yourself for sure. But that cognitive processing therapy would help, or trauma focused cognitive therapy. But one thing you may be able to do is, if you have lots of triggers that bring back trauma memories, is to start to look at how the trigger today is different to the past memory. So if I had a car accident, maybe the last thing I saw before the car ran into me was white lights coming towards me. I might have a trigger today being bright lights in my ceiling light. And so when I see them, I might get memories of my car accident. And so what I would be saying to myself is, these are bright lights in my ceiling. They're not headlights of a car. These lights are in my loft. They're not headlights of a car about to hit me. These lights mean I'm safe, I'm at home, nothing bad is about to happen. In the past, the car accident happened. These lights mean it's 5 o'clock on a Thursday. It's not 12 noon on a Tuesday when the car accident happened. So I hope that gives you an example of how then and now works, and that might be helpful.
Yeah, again, it's like rewiring your brain, but again, self-empowered to go through these techniques, these 7 key skills.
I just wanted to speak to shame, because it's a really key cognitive theme that comes up with post-traumatic stress. And often people, you know, they go over and over in their mind what they feel they should have done differently, or they overthink how people would react if they knew what they had done in the trauma or how they had behaved. And I think it's important to recognize that shame causes us to withdraw. And it means that we're less likely to lean on our friends or family for support. So just recognize that that's a common element, a common behavior associated with shame. And I think one of the things I often do that's helpful for clients who feel shameful about something in relation to the trauma is I have them mention it to somebody and see how the other person reacts. And usually they're quite terrified to do this, understandably. And then they do share it with somebody, and they typically have a positive reaction, which it's a big relief, and it just helps to reduce that sense of shame. So I think if you are able to speak to at least one other person about what you are really worried about in terms of what you feel ashamed about, that might be really helpful in helping to reduce that feeling for you.
So you chip away at it, so it doesn't consume you. I think there's the phrase of getting the Sundays, and I think you've discussed it a little bit, is like, how do you treat early morning anxiety for a person with social anxiety? So it's early morning, I'm about to start my day. It could be work, it could be going to school, it could be taking care of a relative, but the churn starts, or you get a case of the Sunday saying, oh my gosh, I've got to go back to work on Monday, and your head starts spinning. Would it be the 3-minute carrot, or the planning ahead on Sunday, giving yourself a reward, something that you can look forward to, like, I'm going to eat it, not that I recommend it, a slice of chocolate cake for breakfast? So it's just something that's irregular and I wouldn't normally do, but when I wake up in the morning, I go, I've got a piece of chocolate cake in the fridge and I'm going to go have that. I'm a rebel.
Yeah, nice. So you're kind of like, you're treating yourself. I think whenever we feel anxious or worried about something in the future, I think it's helpful to get really clear, what is it that I'm anxious about? So it's the start of the day. I'm anxious about, kind of going into work and talking to my colleagues or talking to my boss, or maybe I have to speak to somebody at the gas station and I'm feeling anxious about that because I haven't had a lot of social contact over the last 18 months. And what am I worried will happen? Well, I might run out of things to say. I might make a fool of myself. I might not speak loud enough. They might frown at me. I might say something really stupid because I haven't been in that situation before. So what I would suggest is whatever you're worried about, turn it into an experiment. Get really clear what you're worried about and be clear about how you think people will respond. So I'm worried I'll say something stupid at the gas station and, you know, the gas attendant's going to point, or the cashier is going to point it out. I'm not going to be able to remember what pump I'm at, and I'm going to cause a long delay in the queue, and then she's going to say something to me.
Yeah.
So then what we want to do is to be clear about that, and then go to the gas station, fill your car up with gas, whatever, speak to the cashier, and focus externally, focus on them, observe how they actually respond to you, and make a note of the outcome. Did your worry come true? And what actually happened, and what did you learn, and what are you learning more generally about how you come across in social situations? So I think it's always good to test your fears, I would say, and of course have something to look forward to. And if that's chocolate cake for breakfast, then do it. That's yummy.
I think it's perhaps this falls into the category of compassion, having compassion for yourself. Yes, it's chocolate cake, but also there's a place for humor, and not mocking yourself, but understanding some of these situations in retrospect. When you tell it, the story in a week or a month's time, you may be the star of your own sitcom in that moment, you know, because it was awful. You got through it. Everyone's okay. But it could be funny in the retelling, but humor is healing as well, I would think.
Humor is really important. If you can look at the lighter side of life where possible, it can be really helpful. And there's some research that I've quoted in Be Extraordinary where humor helped people to experience less pain when they were exposed to shocks, and humor helped to reduce blood pressure. So it is important to look at the funny side of life.
I think that's a song in a Monty Python, a play on a Monty Python movie. So I think we're coming to the end of our time. I do want to, in our closing slide, we are going to show Dr. Wild's book, Be Extraordinary, and how to purchase it. You will find all the 7 tools outlined in the book. I read it. It's an ebook. I put little bookmarks and highlights all throughout the iPad for it. So thank you, Dr. Jennifer Wild from the Department of Experimental Psychiatry in the Medical Sciences Division at Oxford, and for giving us your evening now for this wonderful talk. There are a lot of questions still that go unanswered. I may run some of them by you and respond to those who are asking because they're important, and clearly you've moved people and you've helped them learn new skills, but also learn how to take care of themselves and those they love. Thank you. Return on Monday, July 26th, when Oxford North America will host our next live webinar on a different topic, Politics and Power, How Digital Humanities Can Help Us Explore the Past, with Dr. Megan Gooch, Dr. Nicholas Cole, and Dr. Andrew Cosworth. There's also a way for you to make a donation to Oxford if you are so inclined by using the QR code on the screen. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Wild. Give our very best to everyone at Oxford.